if you say the truth and nothing else, you'll have an immense adventure as a consequence. You won't know what's going to happen to you, and you have to let go of your clinging to the outcome. You have to let go. But the truth will reveal the world the way it's intended to be revealed, and the consequence for you will be that you'll have the adventure of your life. And the other part of that ethos is this, and it makes perfect sense to me. I can't see how it can be any other way, which is that whatever makes itself manifest as a consequence of the truth is the best possible reality that could be manifest, even if you can't see it. And the proposition that Genesis puts forward is, if you act in truth, then the order you produce is good, regardless of how it appears. It's an axiomatic statement of it's an axiomatic ethical proposition that the job of whatever extracts order from chaos is properly done if it's done in truth. And that's worth thinking about, because it might be true.
Now you might have to pay a price for that, but that's fine. You're going to pay a price for every bloody thing you do and everything you don't do. You don't get to choose to not pay a price. You get to choose which poison you're going to take. That's it. So if you're going to stand up for something, stand up for your truth. It'll shape you, because people will respond and object and tell you why you're a fool and a biased moron and why you're ignorant. And then if you listen to them, you'll be just that much less like that the next time you say something. And if you do that for 5 years, you'll be so damn tough and articulate and able to communicate and withstand pressure that you won't even recognize yourself. And then you'll be a force to contend with. It is not safe to speak. And it never will be. But the thing you got to keep in mind is that it's even less safe not to speak, right? It's a balance of risks. It's like you want to pay the price for being who you are and stating your mode of being in the world, or do you want to pay the price for being a bloody serf, one that's enslaved him or herself? Well, that's a major price, man. That thing unfolds over decades, and you'll just be a miserable worm at the end of about 20 years of that, right? No self-respect, no power, no ability to voice your opinions, nothing left but resentment because everyone's against you, because of course you've never stood up for yourself. It's like, say what you think carefully, pay attention to your words. The price it's a price you want to pay if you are willing to believe that truth is the cornerstone of society. And in the most real sense, if you're willing to take that leap, then tell the truth and see what happens. And nothing better could possibly happen to you. There'll be ups and downs, and there'll be pushback, and there'll be controversy and all of that, but it doesn't matter. It's like, wake up, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. That's a start.
When you begin to live truthfully, not merely avoiding lies, but aligning your words and actions with what you genuinely perceive to be real, something remarkable starts to happen. The chaos around you, that overwhelming swirl of uncertainty and fragmentation, begins to organize itself. Not because the world itself has changed, but because you've changed. You become a fixed point, a moral axis in a turbulent reality. And from that point, everything begins to reorient. People notice. Structures shift. Even your room looks different. It's not magic, it's alignment. When your being is in order, the world responds in kind. That's how order emerges. Not by demanding the world to change, but by becoming someone around whom change is possible. Live as though truth matters, and you become the kind of person the world can build itself around.
So let's say you go over your past with a fine-tooth comb and you decide you're going to take responsibility for everything that you did that was wrong and everything that you failed to do that you could have done that was right. It's like, does that change the world? It's like, depends on how thoroughly you do it. You might say it changes the world like nothing else possibly can. And I think that that's actually right.
What's one thing I'm doing wrong that I know I'm doing wrong that I could fix, that I would fix? It's like, you meditate on that, you'll get an answer. And it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary one. You know, and it's often something that will point you to small things. Like that works. You start making those micro improvements, like real micro improvements, real on the ground, actual micro improvements to things you know that are wrong, you'll improve unbelievably rapidly.
That it's not some casual self-help doctrine. It's that if you don't organize yourself properly, you'll pay for it, and in a big way, and so will the people around you. And I would say, start where you can start. You know, if something announces itself to you as in need of repair, that you could repair, then hey, fix it. You fix 100 things like that, your life will be a lot different.
You know, if you take people, then you expose them voluntarily to things that they are avoiding and are afraid of, you know, that they know they need to overcome in order to meet their goals, their self-defined goals. If you can teach people to stand up in the face of the things they're afraid of, they get stronger. And you don't know what the upper limits to that are, because you might ask yourself, like, if for 10 years, if you didn't avoid doing what you knew you needed to do, what would you be like? Well, you know, there are remarkable people who come into the world from time to time, and there are people who do find out over decades-long periods what they could be like if they were who they were, if they spoke their being forward. And they get stronger and stronger and stronger, and we don't know the limits to that. We do not know the limits to that. And so the truth does set you free, but the problem is that it destroys everything that isn't worthy in you as it sets you free, and that's a process of burning. And it's painful, because you cling to what you shouldn't be, partly out of pride and partly out of ignorance and partly out of laziness, and so then you encounter something true, and you all know this perfectly well, because when was the last time that you learned something important that wasn't a blow of some sort, you know? And it's often you look back at your life and you think, oh God, I really learned something there. I wouldn't want to do that again, but it really changed my life. I mean, sometimes it can really destroy you, you know, an encounter with the truth, and you never really recover. But now and then something comes along and straightens you out, and a lot of you has to go. A lot of you has to burn away, you know, and I suppose in some sense the idea is that everything about you that isn't worthy is to be put into the flames.
Look, life isn't fair. The world isn't constructed to hand you justice on a silver platter. But here's the thing. The world does respond to who you are. Now, there's a kind of truth that manifests itself not in facts, but in the way you act. There's objective truth, the kind you find in a lab, testable and replicable. But there's also tool truth or pragmatic truth, what works. A sharp axe is more true than a dull one. Not because it describes the world, but because it functions better in the world. Human beings needed to figure out how to act before we understood the objective nature of reality. That's wisdom, encoded across generations, shaped by selection, by survival. And that's why you don't just discard ancient traditions. You update them through your life. You realize the archetype in the confines of your own experience. That's your moral obligation. The past is a corpse, but it's a living corpse. And those of us who inhabit it aren't clawing each other to death yet, because it still works. Partially, but it's not alive enough. And if you're not awake and alert, it'll fall apart. So what does that mean? It means you rescue your dead father from the belly of the whale. That's the task. You live out the ancient ideal, not by copying it, but by embodying it, by voluntarily shouldering the burden of updating what it means to live rightly in the here and now. And what happens when you do that? Well, chaos surrounds you. You step out beyond what you know. You stop saying what you don't believe. You aim at something high, and you tell the truth, not because it's easy, not because it's safe, because it's right. And then the world responds, not necessarily with material reward, but with depth, with meaning, with alignment. You become someone people can rely on, someone who can carry a burden, And when you're like that, opportunity comes your way because people trust you. Relationships become real. And even though you may suffer, you will suffer. You find something stronger than happiness. You find peace. Not the peace of control, not the peace of ease, but the peace that comes from knowing. I'm living in truth. I'm aiming straight. I'm doing what I can to be better tomorrow than I was today. And that's enough. Life is hard. It's a crucifixion. You're suffering and adrift, and you have your reasons, and it's no wonder you think life is meaningless. So first of all, we're going to take that seriously. I'm not saying you don't have reasons to feel the way you do. You do. But despite that, there's more to you than you think. And you know that too, because you berate yourself for not manifesting it. You know perfectly well you could be far more than you are. And you don't know what the upper limit of that is. You start with this. Can you take care of yourself? At least that. Can you be someone reliable? Maybe someone others can depend on. Maybe your family, maybe your community. God only knows how far you could go with that. That's what people admire. Not catastrophe. Not someone who's useless to themselves and a danger to others. No one admires that. You admire people who carry a burden, who make things better, who take responsibility. That's meaning. You do the small things you can, the humble things. You put yourself together in those tiny, embarrassing ways that are real. And if you do that enough, you fortify yourself. And that works. That works better than anything I've ever seen. People come up to me on the street, in airports, in cities I've never been to, and they tell me, I was in a pit, addicted, lost, no direction, miserable. Then I started doing what you said, telling the truth, taking responsibility, fixing my family, aiming at something, and things are better, way better. It's ridiculous how often that happens. But it's also unbelievably positive, because what it shows is that when people humble themselves enough to confront the suffering and act properly, that little motive potential starts to expand and expand and expand. And I believe, and I do believe this, that there's no limit to that expansion. Because in some sense, we're this strange combination of finite and infinite. And I don't know what the limits are, but I know they're far beyond where we're starting from. So what's the antidote to suffering? It's not happiness. It's not ease. It's not pleasure. It's meaning. And where do you find meaning? In truth, in responsibility, and aiming at the good with everything you've got. If you decided to live by truth and to aim at the highest good, if you staked your life on that, who the hell could you be? No one knows. But God only knows what miracles we could pull off if enough of us tried.